If you're new here, welcome to our channel. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. Your support means the world to us and helps us keep sharing stories that deserve to be heard. I should have known something was wrong when Isla spent 46 minutes picking out earrings for her office party, not because she cared how she looked. She always looked perfect, but because she kept glancing at me in the mirror like I was a stain she couldn't scrub out. Arthur, you're not wearing that shirt. Are you? She adjusted her diamond studs for the third time, the ones I'd bought her for our 6th anniversary back when she still smiled at me across restaurant tables. I looked down at my blue button-down, clean, pressed, respectable, the kind of shirt a mid-level advertising executive wears to his wife's PR firm party. What's wrong with it? It's just she waved her hand dismissively. Never mind, we're already late. The drive to the Fairmont Olympic was silent, except for the rain drumming against the windshield and Isla's fingers tapping against her phone. Seattle in October, gray skies and greater moods. I'd lived here for 15 years, but tonight the city felt foreign, like I was seeing it through someone else's eyes. The hotel ballroom buzzed with the kind of energy that comes from people who take themselves very seriously. Isla's colleagues from Morrison & Associates clustered around cocktail tables, their laughter sharp and calculated. I recognized most of them from previous events, though I doubted they remembered me to them. I was just Isla's plus one. There's George. Isla said, her voice suddenly bright. She straightened her dress. Black, expensive, the kind that made her look untouchable. I need to introduce you properly. George Shaw stood near the bar surrounded by a small crowd of admirers. Tall, silver-haired, the kind of confidence that comes from never having to check your bank balance. Isla's boss and the managing partner of the firm. I'd met him twice before at company events. Brief handshakes and forgotten conversations. George. Isla practically glowed as we approached. You remember my husband Arthur? George's smile was practiced professional. Of course, Arthur, good to see you again. How's the advertising world treating you? Can't complain. Business is steady. I kept my voice neutral, friendly, the way you talk to your wife's boss at company parties. Arthur works for Henderson Creative. Isla added quickly. They do mostly local campaigns, small stuff. The dismissal in her tone hit like a slap. Small stuff, 15 years of building campaigns, winning regional awards, keeping food on our table, small stuff. I felt my jaw tighten but kept smiling. Well, someone has to handle the local market, George said, with the kind of laugh that wasn't quite mocking but wasn't quite kind either. Excuse me, I said. I think I need a drink. I walked to the bar, ordered a whiskey and watched Isla work the room. She moved like she belonged there, like she'd been born to navigate these conversations about quarterly reports and client acquisitions. When had I stopped being part of her world? When had I become the embarrassment she had to explain away? Arthur Porter Wright. A woman appeared beside me at the bar. Chloe Martinez, Isla's best friend and fellow PR director. Blonde, sharp-eyed, the kind of person who collected gossip like some people collected stamps. That's right. How are you? Chloe. Oh, you know how it is. Same drama. Different day. She ordered a martini and leaned closer. Between you and me, Isla's been working some serious overtime. Lately, these big clients demand everything. I'm sure they do. George has been really hands-on with her projects. They've been staying late together almost every night this month. She took a sip of her martini. Watching me over the rim must be nice, having such a dedicated boss. Something cold settled in my stomach. Yeah, nice. Chloe's smile was sharp. Well, I should go mingle. You know how these things are. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I watched her disappear into the crowd, her words echoing in my head, working late, staying together. George's hands-on approach. I turned back toward where I'd left Isla and George, but they were gone. I spent the next 20 minutes making small talk with people whose names I'd forget by morning, all while scanning the room for Isla. Finally, I spotted her near the elevators, standing close to George, too close. His hand was on her lower back, familiar and possessive. She was laughing at something he'd said, the kind of laugh I hadn't heard from her in months. They stepped into the elevator together. I stood there for a long moment, whiskey growing warm in my hand, watching the numbers light up above the elevator doors. 3rd floor, 4th, 5th. The elevator stopped at the 7th floor and stayed there looking for someone. I turned to find Sam Rodriguez, my old college roommate and the closest thing I had to a best friend in the city. He'd somehow gotten an invitation through his girlfriend, who worked in Isla's marketing department. Just getting some air, I said. Sam looked around the crowded ballroom. Yeah, this crowd's a bit much. How you holding up? Fine, great, living the dream, right? Sam knew me well enough to hear the lie. Want to get out of here? There's a decent bar down the street. I looked back at the elevator still stopped on 7. Actually, I think I'm going to head home. Tell Isla I wasn't feeling well if you see her. You sure you're okay? Never better. The rain had intensified by the time I reached my car. I sat in the parking garage for 10 minutes, engine running, trying to process what I'd seen. Isla and George, the elevator, the way she'd looked at him, 15 years of marriage, 15 years of believing we were building something together, and now this. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. Ron Castellano, private investigator. I'd used him for background checks on potential clients, but I knew he handled other kinds of investigations too. He answered on the third ring. Ron here. Ron, it's Arthur Porter. I need to hire you for something personal. A pause. What kind of personal? The kind that involves my wife and her boss. I see. Can you meet me tomorrow? My office? 10 a.m. I'll be there. I hung up and drove home through the empty streets, windshield wipers fighting a losing battle against the rain. Our apartment felt different when I walked in. Smaller, somehow less like home and more like a place where three strangers happened to sleep. I poured another whiskey and sat at my desk, opening my laptop. If Isla wanted to play games, I could play too. I started with our joint credit cards, changing the spending limits and setting up alerts for any charges over $50. Then I moved to our savings accounts, transferring half the money to a new account in my name. Only small moves, careful moves. But the game had started. Isla came home at 3 a.m, slipping into bed beside me like nothing had happened. She smelled like expensive perfume in someone else's cologne. How was the rest of the party? I asked quietly. Fine. You missed a good time. Her voice was steady, practiced. Chloe said. You weren't feeling well, just tired. She turned away from me, pulling the covers up to her chin. Good night, Arthur. I lay awake until dawn, listening to her breathe and planning my next move. Ron Castellano's office occupied the third floor of a building that had seen better decades. The elevator wheeled and groaned, and the hallway smelled like old coffee and broken dreams. Perfect atmosphere for hiring a private investigator to spy on your wife's marriage troubles. Ron asked. As I settled into a worn leather chair across from his desk, he was exactly what you'd expect from a PI-50's gray stubble eyes that had seen too much of humanity's worst impulses. Something like that. I handed him a photo of Isla from our last vacation. Isla Porter, my wife. I think she's having an affair with her boss, George Shaw. Ron studied the photo. What makes you think? So I told him about the party, the elevator, Chloe's comments about late nights. It sounded thin when I said it out loud, but Ron just nodded and took notes. I'll need access to her email if possible, phone records, credit card statements, the usual. He quoted his daily rate, expensive but not unreasonable. How far do you want me to go with this? As far as necessary. I need proof. And then what? Good question. What did I want? Divorce seemed obvious, but that felt too simple, too clean. Isla had spent years making me feel small, insignificant. Last night had just been the final confirmation of what I'd suspected for months. Let me worry about that part. I left Ron's office and drove to Henderson Creative, trying to focus on work, but concentration was impossible. Every email, every phone call felt trivial compared to the larger question of what my wife was doing with George Shaw. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text from Isla. Lunch meeting ran long. Don't wait up for dinner tonight. Another late project, right. I called Ron. She's with him again tonight. Can you follow her? Already on it. I'll have something for you by tomorrow. The next 24 hours crawled by like a wounded animal. I went through the motions at work, attended meetings, reviewed campaigns, but my mind was elsewhere. When Isla came home Thursday night at midnight, I pretended to be asleep. Friday morning, Ron called. We need to meet. I have photos. His office felt smaller this time, the walls closing in as he spread a series of photographs across his desk. Isla and Ari entering the Arthuris Hotel. Isla and George in the hotel bar, sitting close, her hand on his thigh. Isla and George kissing in the elevator. There's more, Ron said quietly. They've been meeting twice a week for the past month, always the same hotel, always the same room. He pays cash. I stared at the photos, feeling something cold and hard settle in my XH***T. Not surprise. I'd known really, but a kind of crystalline clarity. The woman I'd married, the woman I'd spent 15 years loving and supporting was gone, had been gone for months, maybe years. There's something else, Ron continued. Shaw's married too. Wife's name is Hazel, 3 kids in private school. Big house in Bellevue. I did some digging. She doesn't know about the affair, but she's been asking questions about his late nights. Interesting. What do you want me to do with this information? I gathered up the photos, studying Isla's face in each one. She looked happy, happier than I'd seen her in years. Nothing yet, but keep watching them. I want to know their patterns, their schedules, everything. That afternoon, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of confronting Isla directly, I started laying groundwork for something bigger, something that would hurt her the way she'd hurt me, but deeper and more permanently. I began with her social circle. Isla's reputation was everything to her. She'd built her entire identity around being successful, admired, envied. That reputation was her weakness. I called my friend Greg Nakamura, who sat on the board of the Seattle Public Relations Association. Isla had been trying to get elected to their executive committee for 3 years. Greg, it's Arthur Porter. I need to ask you something confidential. Sure, what's up? If someone on your board was having an affair with a married colleague, would that be grounds for removal from consideration for the executive committee? A long pause? Arthur, is everything okay? Just a hypothetical question. Well, hypothetically, yes. The association takes ethics very seriously. Any kind of scandal could damage our reputation. Good to know. Next, I researched George Shaw's wife. Hazel Shaw, 42, former marketing executive turned stay-at-home mom, active in her children's school. Volunteer work. The kind of woman who'd built her life around her family's reputation. I created an anonymous email account and sent her a simple message. Your husband is having an affair with Isla Porter from his office. They meet at the Arthur's Hotel every Tuesday and Thursday. I thought you should know. I attached one of Ron's photos, nothing explicit, just George and Isla entering the hotel together. Then I waited. Isla came home that Friday night in a good mood, humming as she poured herself a glass of wine. How was your day? She asked the same question she'd asked for 15 years. Fine, yours busy. George's got me working on this huge campaign for Westfield development. It's going to be amazing for my portfolio. I'll bet it is. I thought, that's great. When do you think you'll be done with it? Oh, it's going to be a long project. Lots of late nights, probably some weekend work. She sipped her wine, not meeting my eyes. I hope you don't mind. Of course not. I want you to succeed. She smiled then, the kind of smile that once made my heart race, now it just made me sick. Saturday morning my phone rang. Ron, you need to see this? He said. Can you meet me in an hour? I found him at a coffee shop near Pike Place Market. Looking grim. He slid a manila envelope across the table. Shaw's wife got your message. He said she hired her own investigator yesterday. Word is she's planning to file for divorce next week. Fast work. There's more. Isla doesn't know yet, but Shaw's been transferred to the Portland office effective immediately. The official story is that it's a promotion, but my source at Morrison & Associates says the managing partners found out about the affair and want him gone. I felt a smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. The dominoes were starting to fall. What about Isla? Still in the dark, but not for long. Shaw's supposed to tell her on Monday. Monday that gave me the weekend to prepare for phase 3 of my plan. I spent Saturday researching Isla's family, her parents, conservative Catholics from Spokane who'd always been lukewarm about our marriage because I wasn't religious enough for their tastes. They adored Isla, their successful daughter, who'd made something of herself in the big city. They'd be devastated to learn about the affair. Sunday evening. Isla was packing for what she claimed was a business trip to Vancouver. Just 3 days, she said, folding her best lingerie into her suitcase. George wants me to scout some locations for the Westfield campaign. George wanted her to scout locations, all right. Probably the ceiling of another hotel room. Have a good trip. I said. She kissed my cheek, a brief, distracted peck. I'll call you tonight. After she left, I sat in our living room with a glass of whiskey and Ron's photographs spread out on the coffee table. 15 years of marriage reduced to evidence of betrayal, but I wasn't sad anymore. I was angry, and anger I was discovering was much more useful than sadness. I picked up my phone and dialed Isla's parents. Mrs. Patterson, it's Arthur. I'm sorry to call so late, but I thought you should know Isla's having an affair with her boss. I have proof. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, her mother's voice, barely a whisper. Are you certain? I have photographs. Another long pause, then send them to me. I hung up and opened my laptop. Time for the next phase of Isla's education. In consequences, Monday morning arrived with the kind of gray drizzle that makes Seattle feel like the edge of the world. I sat in my office at Henderson Creative pretending to review campaign proposals while actually watching my phone for updates from Ron. Isla had texted me from Vancouver at 7 a.m., a photo of her hotel breakfast that could have been taken anywhere at 1015. Ron called. Shaw just got called into the managing partner's office. Julie Elia's been trying to reach him all morning and his phone's been going straight to voicemail. She's starting to panic. Good, let her panic. At 1001:30, my phone buzzed with a call from Isla. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Arthur, thank God, I've been trying to reach George all morning. And George, a pause too long. My boss George Shaw. We were supposed to meet about the Vancouver locations and he's not answering his phone. I'm worried something might have happened. I'm sure he's fine. Maybe he's just busy. Maybe she didn't sound convinced anyway. How are things there? Interesting. Actually, I had lunch with your parents yesterday. The silence stretched so long I could hear her breathing change. My parents, your mother called. She wanted to know how we were doing. I told her the truth. What truth? That you've been working a lot of late nights with George at hotels. The line went quiet, except for the sound of Isla's world crumbling. Arthur. I can explain. I'm sure you can. You always were good with words. I kept my voice calm, conversational. By the way, George's wife Hazel sends her regards. She's looking forward to meeting you in court. Isla made a sound like she was drowning. How did you find out, Isla? You've been sneaking around for months? Did you really think I wouldn't notice? We need to talk? No, we really don't, but you might want to call your office. I hear George has been transferred to Portland permanently. I hung up and turned off my phone. The next 6 hours were the longest of my life, but also the most satisfying. I knew Isla was panicking, probably trying to reach George, probably realizing that her carefully constructed double life was collapsing around her. At 5 p.m. I drove home to find her car already in our parking space. She was sitting at our kitchen table, still in her travel clothes, looking like she'd aged 10 years since yesterday. We need to talk, she said, without looking up. Now you want to talk. Arthur, please. I know how this looks, but how it looks. I sat down across from her, studying her face, red eyes, smudged makeup, the kind of exhaustion that comes from having your entire life implode in a single day. It looks like my wife has been screwing her boss for months. While lying to my face about it, she flinched. It's not what you think. Really, because I think it's exactly what I think. I have photographs. Isla hotel receipts. George's wife has filed for divorce and named you as correspondent. Your parents know, your colleagues know. By tomorrow, everyone will know. You sent the photos to my parents. Her voice was barely a whisper. Your mother asked for proof. I provided it. Isla put her head in her hands. They'll never forgive me, probably not. George said he was going to leave his wife. He said, we were going to be together, and you believed him. I shook my head. Isla, George Shaw is 44 years old with 3 kids and a wife who's about to take half his assets. Did you really think he was going to throw that away for his employee? He loves me. He loves the thrill of screwing around behind everyone's back. There's a difference. She looked up at me then, and for a moment I saw the woman I'd married 15 years ago, vulnerable, uncertain, human. Then her expression hardened. So what now? You divorce me and take half of everything. Is that your plan? Actually, I already took half of everything, our savings accounts, the investment portfolio, the vacation fund. I moved it all to accounts in my name only legally. I was entitled to do it. Her face went pale. You can't do that. I already did. Check your wallet. I also canceled our joint credit cards and that car you love so much, the BMW. It's registered in my name, insurance too. Isla stood up so fast her chair fell over. You bastard. You can't. What? Protect myself from a wife who's been lying and cheating for months. Watch me. She raised her hand like she was going to slap me, but I caught her wrist. Don't. I said quietly, you've done enough damage. For a moment we stood there, frozen, her wrist in my grip. 15 years of marriage, balanced on a knife's edge. Then I let go and stepped back. Pack your things. I said, you can stay at Chloe's or find a hotel. I don't care, but you're not staying here tonight. This is my home too, not anymore. The lease is in my name. Remember, you wanted me to handle all the boring paperwork while you focused on your career. Congratulations. Your career just cost you your marriage and your home. She stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. Maybe she was. I never meant for this to happen, she said finally, but it did happen. And now you get to live with the consequences. Isla packed 3 suitcases while I sat in the living room listening to her move around our former bedroom like a ghost. When she came back out, she looked smaller, somehow diminished. Where will I go? That's not my problem anymore. She wheeled her suitcases to the door, then turned back. Arthur, I know you're angry, but we can work through this. We can go to counseling. We can. Isla, stop. It's over, not just the marriage, everything, your job, your reputation, your family relationship. P.S. George is gone. Your parents aren't speaking to you. And by tomorrow morning, everyone in Seattle's PR community will know exactly what kind of person you are. You're enjoying this. I considered the question, was I enjoying it? Maybe. But it was more than that. For the first time in years, I felt like I had some control over my life. I'm surviving it, I said. There's a difference. After she left, I poured myself a whiskey and sat on the couch looking around our apartment, my apartment now. It felt bigger already, like I could breathe again. My phone rang. Ron. Shaw's wife filed a restraining order against Isla this afternoon. She's not allowed within 500 feet of their house or the kids' school. Thorough. Gets better. Morrison and Associates put Isla on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. Word is they're going to fire her as soon as their lawyers give the all clear. I felt that cold satisfaction again, like ice, water in my veins. What about George? Portland office rescinded the transfer offer. He's unemployed as of 5 p.m. today. Interesting, how quickly things can fall apart. Yeah, well, that's what happens when you mess with the wrong guy's wife. I hung up and finished my whiskey thinking about Isla driving around Seattle with nowhere to go, probably calling Chloe or Max or any of her other friends who might still take her calls. But I wasn't done yet. Not even close. Phase 3 was going to be the most satisfying of all. Tuesday morning brought unexpected sunshine to Seattle, the kind of crisp October day that makes you believe in new beginnings. I woke up alone in my apartment, and for the first time in months. I felt genuinely optimistic about the future. Isla had left 17 voicemails overnight. I deleted them without listening at work. I threw myself into a campaign for a local restaurant chain. The kind of project I'd normally find routine. But today everything felt different, sharper, like I was seeing the world in high definition. After years of looking through fog, around 10 a.m. my assistant knocked on my door. "Arthur, there's a woman here to see you, says it's personal." Hazel Shaw stood in our lobby like she owned the place, tall, elegant, the kind of composed anger that comes from having your life destroyed by people you trusted. She wore a black suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary and carried herself like someone who'd never had to check price tags. "Mr. Porter, I'm Hazel Shaw. I think we need to talk." I led her to a conference room and closed the door. "I'm sorry about your situation. Mrs. Shaw, are you?" She sat down and opened a leather portfolio because from what I understand, you orcs *** trotted quite a bit of it. "I simply provided you with information about your husband's activities. What you did with that information was your choice." She smiled and it wasn't entirely pleasant. "Fair enough. I have a proposition for you." "I'm listening." "George and your wife cost me 15 years of marriage and nearly $3 million in assets. I'll never recover. They humiliated me in front of my friends, my children's schools, my entire social circle. I can imagine. No, you can't, but you can help me make sure they pay for it properly." She slid a photograph across the table. George and Isla at what looked like a company retreat, laughing over, drinks, his hand on her thigh. This was taken 3 months ago at Morrison and Associates' annual retreat in Whistler. They weren't exactly discreet, meaning half the Seattle PR community has known about their affair for months. They've been laughing about it behind our backs, the stupid spouses who didn't know what was happening in our own marriages. I felt that familiar cold anger, settling in my XH***T. "What do you want from me?" "Revenge, complete total public revenge. I want them to lose everything, their careers, their reputations, their ability to show their faces in the city." "And how do you propose we do that?" Hazel opened her portfolio wider, revealing a stack of documents, photos, and what looked like hotel receipts. "I've been busy since yesterday. Bank records showing George used company funds to pay for hotel rooms, email exchanges between him and Isla, discussing confidential client information, evidence of at least 6 different ethics violations that could end both their careers permanently." I studied the documents. Hazel had been thorough, more thorough than I'd expected. "There's more," she continued. "The Morrison and Associates Christmas party is this Friday night black tie event. All the major players in Seattle. PR and marketing. Isla's been planning it for months. It was supposed to be her big moment to shine in front of the partners. She won't be there. She's on administrative leave. Actually, she will be. I made some calls this morning. The partners decided she should attend to maintain appearances while they conduct their investigation. They don't want clients asking questions about why their event coordinator suddenly disappeared." I was beginning to see where this was going. "You want to make a scene at the party. I want to end their careers at the party publicly, permanently in front of everyone who matters in their industry. What do you need from me?" "Access. You're still technically Isla's husband. You have a right to attend as her guest. I'll handle the rest." I looked at Hazel. Shaw really looked at her. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about justice, about making sure Isla and George faced real consequences for their choices. What kind of consequences are we talking about? Professional destruction. Social exile, the kind of reputation damage that follows you for years. Her smile was sharp as a blade. "By the time I'm done with them, they won't be able to get jobs. Managing social media, for a food truck, and George is going to discover what it feels like to be publicly humiliated by someone he underestimated." I thought about Isla's face when I'd told her about the photographs, the way she'd looked when she realized her carefully constructed life was falling apart. Then I thought about 15 years of marriage of supporting her career while she slowly grew to despise me for not being successful enough. Ambitious enough, worthy enough, I'm in. Hazel's smile widened. Excellent. Here's what we're going to do. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Hazel had connections throughout Seattle's business community. She'd spent 15 years as George's wife, attending charity galas and networking events, building relations*. PS with exactly the people who could destroy Isla's career. Meanwhile, I played the part of the grieving husband. I called in sick to work, let my beard grow out, wore the same clothes 3 days in a row. When people asked how I was doing, I gave them just enough pain to seem authentic while dropping carefully chosen details about Isla's betrayal. She was working late so many nights. I told our neighbor, Mrs. Chen, I should have known something was wrong with her boss. Mrs. Chen's eyes widened. The married one with children. I don't like to gossip, but yes. By Thursday, the story had spread through our building, our social circle, and into the broader community. Isla Porter, the successful PR executive, had thrown away her marriage for an affair with her married boss. The details grew more sordid, with each retelling. Friday evening I put on my best suit and drove to the Fairmont Olympic Hotel, the same place where this had all started a week ago. When I'd watched Isla and George disappear into an elevator together. The Morrison and Associates Christmas party was exactly what you'd expect from a high-end PR firm, elegant, expensive and full of people who thought they were more important than they actually were. I checked in at the registration table, ignoring the sympathetic looks from people who'd heard about my situation. Isla was already there, standing near the bar in a red dress that probably cost more than most people's rent. She looked nervous, scanning the room like she was expecting trouble. She was right to be nervous. Hazel Shaw arrived at 8:30, fashionably late and absolutely stunning in a black evening gown that made every other woman in the room look overdressed. She moved through the crowd like a shark, greeting people by name, Air King cheeks, playing the role of the gracious socialite I watched from across the room as she approached Isla. Isla darling. Hazel's voice carried just far enough to attract attention. I don't think we've been properly introduced. I'm Hazel Shaw, George's wife. The color drained from Isla's face. Mrs. Shaw. IOH, please call me Hazel after all. We have so much in common now. Hazel's smile was perfect, predatory. I understand you've been working very closely with my husband. A small crowd was gathering, drawn by the tension in Hazel's voice and Isla's obvious discomfort. I should go, Isla said, backing away. Oh, but you can't leave yet. The evening's just getting started. Hazel raised her champagne glass and tapped it with her ring. The sound cut through the party, chatter like a knife. Excuse me everyone. I have an announcement to make. The ballroom fell silent. As Hazel Shaw commanded attention with the kind of presence that comes from years of practice at charity glass and corporate events. She stood in the center of the room. Champagne glass raised, every eye focused on her elegant figure in black. I want to thank Morrison and Associates for hosting such a lovely evening. She began, her voice carrying perfectly across the silent room. It's wonderful to see so many familiar faces, people who've been part of my family's life for so many years. Isla stood frozen near the bar, her red dress suddenly looking garish under the ballroom lights. I could see her calculating escape routes, but Hazel had positioned herself between Isla and the nearest exit. You see, my husband George Shaw has worked so hard to build relations*. PS in this community. So many late nights, so many important meetings. Hazel's smile never wavered. Of course, some of those meetings were more personal than others. A murmur rippled through the crowd. People were starting to understand that this wasn't a typical thank you speech. George always spoke so highly of his colleagues at Morrison and Associates, especially Isla Porter, such a dedicated employee so willing to go above and beyond for her clients. Isla's face had gone completely white. She started moving toward the exit, but found her path blocked by curious party guests who sensed drama unfolding. In fact, Hazel continued, George and Isla have been collaborating so closely that they've been meeting at the Arthur's Hotel twice a week for the past 4 months. Such dedication to their projects. The murmur became a buzz of shocked conversation. I saw several people pulling out their phones, probably texting friends who weren't at the party. Hazel, please. Isla's voice cracked as she tried to interrupt. Oh, I'm not finished yet, dear. Hazel reached into her evening bag and pulled out a manila envelope. You see, I've discovered that George has been using company funds to pay for these hotel meetings, charging client dinners that never happened, expending travel for conferences that didn't exist. She opened the envelope and began distributing copies of documents to the crowd, bank statements, hotel receipts, email exchanges, all the evidence she'd shown me earlier in the week. Embezzlement, she announced cheerfully, fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and of course, adultery with a subordinate employee, which I believe violates several company policies. The managing partners of Morrison and Associates, 3 men in expensive suits who'd been watching the scene unfold with growing horror, pushed through the crowd toward Hazel. Mrs. Shaw, the senior partner, said urgently. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. Oh, but privacy is what got us into this mess? Isn't it? Hazel's laugh was musical and terrifying. Besides, I think Islaw's colleagues deserve to know exactly what kind of person they've been working with. She turned to address Islaw directly. Tell me, dear, did George promise to leave his wife for you? Did he say you were special? Different from all the others? There weren't others, Islaw started. Weren't there? Hazel pulled out her phone and began scrolling through what looked like text messages because I found some very interesting communications between George and his previous assistant, Rebecca Martinez. And before her there was Amanda Chen from the accounting department. Oh, and let's not forget Sarah Williams from the Portland office. Each name hit Islaw like a physical blow. I watched her face crumble as she realized she hadn't been George's first affair or even his most recent. You see, Hazel continued, conversational George has quite a pattern, young, ambitious employees who think sleeping with the boss will advance their careers. He promises them. The world uses them for a few months, then moves on to the next victim. That's not. Islaw's voice was barely a whisper. Not what, not true. I have hotel receipts going back 3 years. Islaw, different women, same pattern, same lies. The crowd was completely silent now, watching Islaw's public destruction with the kind of fascinated horror usually reserved for car accidents. But here's the truly beautiful part, Hazel said, warming to her theme. George isn't even good at covering his tracks, the company credit card statements, the fake expense reports, the emails discussing confidential client information. He documented everything. It's like he wanted to get caught. She handed another set of documents to the managing partners. I think you'll find those particularly interesting. Evidence that George shared privileged information about the Westfield development account with Islaw, who then used that information to undermine a competing bid from Harrison and Associates. I saw several people in the crowd exchange glances. Harrison and Associates was a major competitor if Islaw had used inside information to sabotage their bid. It was a career-ending scandal, of course. Hazel continued. George won't be able to answer any questions about these irregularities. He seems to have disappeared, hasn't been home in 3 days, hasn't answered his phone, hasn't shown up for work. I believe the technical term is fled the jurisdiction. Islaw made a sound like a wounded animal. He said he loved me. I'm sure he did, dear, right up until the moment he realized his career was over and decided to save himself. Hazel's voice was almost gentle now, which somehow made it more devastating. Did you really think he'd sacrifice his future for someone he could replace with a phone call? The managing partners were huddled together, examining Hazel's documents and whispering urgently. Finally, the senior partner approached Islaw. Ms. Porter, in light of these allegations, your employment with Morrison and Associates is terminated immediately. Security will escort you from the building. You can't. Islaw started. We can, and we are. The evidence of misconduct is overwhelming. You're fired. Effective immediately. We'll be conducting a full audit of your client accounts and reporting any irregularities to the appropriate authorities. 3 security guards appeared as if from nowhere, moving to flank Islaw. The crowd parted to create a path toward the exit. Everyone staring as she was escorted out like a common criminal. But Hazel wasn't done yet. Oh, and Islaw, she called out. As the security guards reached the ballroom doors, I've taken the liberty of sharing copies of these documents with the Seattle Public Relations Association, the Better Business Bureau, and several journalists who specialize in corporate misconduct. I thought they should know about the kind of ethical standards at Morrison and Associates. Islaw turned back one last time. Her face streaked with tears and ruined makeup. For a moment, our eyes met across the crowded ballroom. I saw recognition there, the understanding that I hadn't just discovered her affair. I'd orcs *** trot at her complete destruction. Then the security guards escorted her out and she was gone. The party resumed after a few minutes, but the energy had changed completely. People clustered in small groups, rehashing what they'd witnessed already, turning it into the kind of story that would be told and retold throughout Seattle's business community for years to come. Hazel found me near the bar, looking satisfied and slightly exhausted. How do you feel? She asked. I considered the question. How did I feel? Islaw's career was over. Her reputation was destroyed. Her affair had been exposed in the most public, humiliating way possible. George had abandoned her and fled the city, leaving her to face the consequences alone. Justice served, I said. Finally. Hazel raised her champagne glass to justice. We toasted, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Complete satisfaction. Isla had spent years making me feel small, insignificant, unworthy of her time and attention. She'd betrayed our marriage, lied to my face, and planned to leave me for a man who'd ultimately betrayed her, too. Now she knew exactly how it felt to be discarded, humiliated, left with nothing. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Arthur. Please call me. I have nowhere else to go. I'm sorry for everything. Isla. I showed the message to Hazel, who laughed. Let me guess, George is not returning her calls. Apparently not. While she's about to discover that actions have consequences, real permanent consequences. I deleted the message without responding and finished my champagne tomorrow. Isla would wake up unemployed, unemployable, and alone. Her parents weren't speaking to her, her colleagues had witnessed her public humiliation, and her lover had abandoned her. The moment things got difficult, it was. I reflected exactly what she deserved. The party continued around us, but I was already thinking about the future, my future. For the first time in years, it felt wide open, full of possibilities that didn't involve Isla's disappointment or George Shaw's condescending smile. I looked around the ballroom one last time, taking in the faces of people who'd witnessed Isla's downfall, then walked toward the exit behind me. I could hear Hazel Shaw holding court, probably providing additional details about George's financial crimes, to anyone who wanted to listen. Outside, Seattle's night air was crisp and clean, full of promise. I got in my car and drove home to my apartment, my life ready to begin again. Isla had taught me an important lesson about consequences. Now she'd learned one, too. The game was over, and for once I'd won. My story ends here. If you feel that this story is meaningful and brings useful lessons, please like and subscribe to the channel to support me. Thanks for listening and see you in the next videos.